Hello and welcome everyone to Driving Business Value, 5 New L&D Thinking Habits for 2021. Our presenter today is Laura Overton. Laura Overton is an award-winning learning analyst dedicated to uncovering and sharing effective practices in learning innovation that lead to business value. The author of over 40 reports and hundreds of articles, her work is based on 30 years of practical experience and a commitment to supporting evidence-based learning decisions. As the founder and original CEO of Towards Maturity, she is also known for leading a 15-year longitudinal study program, 2004 to 2019, with thousands of learning leaders and workers around the globe to uncover and share learning strategies that lead to business success. And before we get started with her presentation, I would like to invite you to receive the ebook Emerging Stronger. What does L&D need to stop, start, and accelerate in 2021? To receive this ebook, you either went through the registration process and click consent, which would allow Go1 to send you this particular ebook. If you have not done that and you are unsure, go ahead and put your answer in there and say, please send to me, and we'll make sure you get a copy of that ebook sent to you. And with that, I am going to go over and move over to Laura's slides here. And Laura, when you see your slide, go ahead and please.
Karen, thank you for such a lovely welcome, and thank you as well, everybody, for your welcome and your comments in the chat room. We really want to use the chat room today because actually we are a global community, and this is an incredible time at the beginning of the month, beginning of a new year, where we can really start to think about, are there different ways that we can drive business value? And how do we work smarter? How do we think differently in 2021? Because I think basically the disruption has given us an opportunity to just maybe look at things with a fresh eye, with new thinking habits, and that's exactly what we're going to be covering here today. I mean, Karen, you've given me a brilliant introduction, but as I've said in the chat, what I'm particularly interested in is us working together today as a community, a global community. So you've joined and given up an hour of your time, so I would love to know in the chat room what kind of things you want to get out of the session today, because obviously I'd like to help, but equally so with your colleagues around the globe. So do take a moment just to maybe reflect and think, okay, well, what questions have I come with and what would I like to find out? It would be great to kind of pin that down in the chat pod at the side of the screen. And I think you can see from my personal experience, I've done a lot. I'm quite excited going into 2021 because it will be my 35th year working in learning and development. And I spent 15 of those years really driving a research program to understand how we as learning professionals can deliver better business value. But the thing that I'm most excited about, to be quite honest, is the way that we connect and collaborate together, because ultimately my DNA, my very identity is the fact that I'm passionate about championing the cause of learning professionals. I believe that we can and do add incredible business value back into the organizations that we represent, but we have to continually flex and adapt and change ourselves. So that's really what this session is going to be about. So again, it would just be great to see some of your thoughts and what you would like to see, Rene, about new learning trends. Oh my goodness, there's so much that's going on right now. Absolutely. And again, that's a great answer to put in there. And what's really new, Chuck? Yes, we love something new in learning and development. I think that's so important because we don't want to miss out. And I think what I'd like us to do is to think differently about what does new mean, because There's a lot going on at the moment, and it's great to be part of the guild, and their opportunity to kind of make some of these things go on as well. Kalina, we will be talking about virtual learning, and yes, absolutely, we'll be able to share some of these ideas. Asking the right questions, Rebecca, we will be touching on that, and so let's kind of dig in and explore that a little bit as we go. But I think today particularly, we need to also work out, how do we ask the right questions of ourselves in order to drive better business value? So we'll be keeping a track of these questions. And Karen, I ask you, please, if there are any questions at the beginning that you haven't quite touched on, please bring them up at the end, and we'll make sure we want to have something for absolutely everybody in the room. So, let's get going and let's see, business today. What can we say? Whatever type of organization we're working with, whether it's not-for-profit, whether it's public sector, things are changing from the way that we're receiving our medical attention, the hybrid role of being able to connect with our doctors, the way that robotics are kind of really focused on delivering change in the business world. The fact that Karen, your view at the beginning saying, we're working from home, we're working from anywhere at the moment. Hybrid working environments have really stretched us. And also, there are so many aspects of our work that have been closed off as a result of the last year and the pandemic. It's hard to believe that we've been living through this as a global community for nearly a year now. And never has disruption hit our organizations, our personal lives, our families, and our communities in the way that it has done now. And in one sense, there's never been perhaps a better opportunity for learning and development, and what we are offering to organizations right now to really contribute to their success. So we've all had to roll our sleeves up. We've all had to face disruption. We've all had to do things differently in the last year. And in fact, what I'd love to do is maybe get a poll from you at the moment, if we could bring that up, Karen, just to find out from your perspective in your organization, what has L&D contributed to in terms of the success? And I use the word success loosely, because sometimes it's about thriving, sometimes it's about remote working, but to what extent do you feel that you've been able to make a contribution to your company's success? So it'd be great to actually see some of your views there. I've asked this question literally around the globe. We asked it in Australia, we've asked it in Europe, and typically prior to the pandemic, people were struggling as learning and development professionals to say, where I've really made a difference to my business, to my world of work. But it's so interesting to see on some of these votes that are coming in at the moment, that what we're seeing here through the Learning Guild members, it's a very, very similar pattern. So, share with your thoughts here, and let's keep that rolling.
So I have broadcast the results, and there we have it. We have
Thank you.
40% absolutely critical, and a valuable contribution at 51%.
Yeah, amazing. And exactly the same as we found around the globe. At minimum of 70, in Australasia, it was over 85% who said we were absolutely critical on making a valuable contribution. In Europe, it was over 75%. So in one sense, although our industry has been finding it very difficult in some places to be able to respond, we've been put under so much pressure. The work we have done has been appreciated, I think, more by the organizations that we've been working in. So I think that's really quite phenomenal. So Karen, thank you so much for sharing that and giving us a perspective on that. So if you can remove the poll now, that would be great. And we've been delivering despite the disruption, despite the impacts impact that it's had on our programs, on our schedules, on our initiatives, on our families, on our lives, on our kids. We have been continuing to deliver. So really what we want to do in this next hour together is say, okay, well, where do we go together? Where do we take this? How do we leverage the experience we've had in the last year? How do we combine that with the other things that are going on right now? Coming back to some of your thoughts here, you know, there's about data, we've got about virtual classrooms. Where do we go from here? So in the next hour, I want us to have a conversation together about position that we're in starting 2021, and I will share with you some of the stuff that I've known and I've picked up as well about what's been going on. But then I think I would like to actually take us right back to basics, to look exactly as we just said at the beginning of this session, not necessarily at the new tools and the new ideas and the new data, but the new thinking habits that we need to adopt and employ in order to emerge stronger as a result of the work that we've been through and as a result of this incredible opportunities we've had. So we want to have a look at that, and then I want to dig into some thinking habits. Now I have to say, in the last number of months, all of us have probably had to do things, try something new. And these thinking habits that I want to share with you, you're the first ones to have heard about them, because I really feel as though there's something new. I've been looking at data and we want to really think about ourselves. So bear with me on that. And then let's work together at the end of this session on how we can use those habits to maybe even answer some of our own questions that we've raised in this section. So here we go. Let's have a look. I love this quote from Lennon. There are decades when nothing happens, and there are weeks when decades happen. And, you know, doesn't it feel like that? So let's have a look at really what I think I've been observing, and certainly you've been reflecting as well in the last year. I think for learning and development, what we have seen is a result of this continued organizational change, that actually so many processes are new, so many work environments are new, so many management systems are new, that as a learning profession we have experienced 12 months of very, very high demand at a time when the majority of our delivery options have been cut off and shut off. So in terms of, you know, sort of what's been emerging as a result of that, I think what's happened is that we've very much gone back to using tools and technologies that we are familiar with. So to your question that you had earlier about what's kind of new in the world of learning and work, it's interesting that even Donald Taylor, who's in the UK, he does a sentiment survey. He's just published the first results. 3,000 learning and development leaders around the globe saying what's hot, exactly to your questions. And actually what's hot right now is this need to reskill. It's bumped right up to the top of the level, and rather than the tools and the technologies and the data and the analytics and the AI, it's all about how do we help our organizations reskill, not just for the immediate situation but also for the future as well. And I think what's been really interesting observation, and I'd like to know your views in the chat room as well, please kind of contribute through to some of this chat, is I've observed that it's also been 12 months of literally all hands on deck. Rather than learning and development actually being there, working on our catalogs, working on our programs, working on our content and our delivery and our libraries, we've all been focused on helping the organization survive. So suddenly we're working with the logistics people who are setting up in the garages of their office blocks, handing out laptops, helping people to work remotely, working with managers. It's all hands on deck. And I think this is so fundamental, because what I found in my research is that high-performing learning organizations have always had a common purpose, and we have been provided that opportunity to maybe work with people in a completely different way, even within our own organizations. And you know, again, I would be very interested to know whether that is your perspective as well. You know, Dinya, you've talked here about glad to see that L&D has received more appreciation. I don't think we have appreciated ourselves properly yet, because I think we've been actually quite overwhelmed by this, certainly in the conversations that we've had to. But Jane, you're talking, you've had to get up and running really quickly, and to get the things that you were doing going in a meaningful environment. So, you know, thank you for that, because the other thing I wanted to say is that what I've seen is an adoption of technology that has been accelerated. I mean, interviews with learning and development leaders in retail organizations and in construction businesses who had introduced a new technology platform and were planning a 3-year rollout. Suddenly that platform was front and central. It was the absolute bedrock for implementing change within the organization. So we've seen a rapid increase in virtual classroom, a rapid increase in content conversion, usage of platforms in ways that probably have been very creative, people sharing their experiences, and also engagement through the roof. So we've certainly seen those months of technology adoption. I think what's also interesting in terms of the trends, and you were mentioning this earlier, you know, does this mean we've accelerated into AI, into analytics? No, it doesn't at the moment, because actually we've had to go back to basics, go back to the familiar, but go back to what we know. And this certainly has been backed up in Don Taylor's sentiment survey. So I think in terms of where we're coming in from the year, I'd like to kind of share with you a slight concern that I have, which is, I believe, as learning and development, we're potentially at a cliff edge moment. For us as a profession, as an organization, we have been here before, and in 2001, all of the travel was stopped. Everything went online. We didn't have as sophisticated tools as we do now, but because of 9/11, this was a situation where everything around the globe had to stop, and we flooded into technology. And my concern is we shouldn't be making the same mistakes now, because by using the technology, we didn't know how to use it. It didn't work so well. And then when the pressure was off, everyone breathed a sigh of relief and completely ignored all the progress that they potentially had made in order to go back. So, you know, I think for me, there is a concern that I have, is that with all of this demand, there is a pressure for us as learning professionals to respond to the orders. You want a course, how quickly can I give you a course and a program? There's also a pressure when it comes down to the technology, that we've got this technology tsunami, and certainly the research that we've seen over here in Europe is that many of us feel insecure about using those tools, not mature enough in using those tools, and certainly when it comes down to all pulling together, I think the pressure that we've been under as well has left a lot of learning professionals overwhelmed and potentially feeling that they're unprepared. So, you know, as we leave this last year and come into this year, you know, there are some risks that we need to be looking at, but also what happened before the pandemic. When I was conducting that research program for 15 years, I was constantly looking for the behaviors that helped us work smarter to deliver back to business value, which is why I'm so committed to the learning profession, because over the years, 8,000 learning and development leaders, we asked them, you know, what are you doing? And what we found overall, that learning innovation, when we get that mix right of aligning to the business needs, thinking appropriately about technology, thinking appropriately about our role to enable technology, we can really make a difference to productivity, to change, to customer satisfaction. You know, so, you know, this is the opportunity we've had, all of the work leading up to last year around the globe. And it wasn't just my maturity work, but also the work that's going on in the States with Danny Johnson and Stasia at Red Thread Research. You know, we're all pointing in this direction, that when we get this right, we can really make a difference back to work. So I mentioned before that I'm interested in collaboration and in collective wisdom that we can have from the crowd. And it's great to see that we can actually look at the what we're experiencing together. But midway through last year, I teamed up with Shannon Tipton, who you know, based in Chicago, Michelle Ockers down in Australia, and myself, because Michelle runs a podcast called Learning Uncut, and we wanted to respond to the pandemic, to say, okay, everything is new for us. And we ran a series of interviews with learning leaders and learning experts literally from around the globe to say, how can learning and development emerge stronger from disruption? We are stepping into the unknown. So how can we still deliver better business value? How do we respond in that environment? And we had a lot of advice and feedback. I'm just going to share with you a little bit now, but we're very happy to share that. And part of the ebook is that we've got a lot of the things that our group said, stop this, start this, accelerate this. And here are just a few. So I think what the heart of this was about, how do we start listening to what's going on in the organization? And that means, basically, to your question earlier about data and the questions that we ask of data, I think that's a really important question, because we need to ask the right questions in order to help us to listen to what's going on. Now, I'm not going to give you the answer to that, but it's a really important aspect, and data is one of the listening tools that we have. Harold Jacke, who you know from Canada, talking about the way that we make connections and how we connect others in the business. We've seen that during the pandemic, and it certainly is something we all should go on. Aaron from Australia talks about building our commercial acumen, because at the moment, if we've got a lot of orders coming in for courses, we're so busy responding. If we really want to emerge stronger, we have to maintain and build our commercial acumen so that we are focusing, as Josh says at the bottom of his from 70-20-10 Institute, now Tulsa, on business critical learning. And also, how do we underpin that with evidence-based practice? Wow. Lots of things we can do to work smarter, lots of things. And to be honest, when we raise them, many of them aren't new to you. And certainly as we were listening, many of them weren't new to us. This is a DNA of high-performing learning teams that we had worked on. You know what? Back in 2013. But how do we use technology to connect both the individual's needs and the organization's needs, those moment of need at that point in time? How do we tune in to the active learner voice? This was before we were all talking about agile and kind of digital transformation. How do we design for support learning beyond the course? How do we design in the 70 of experience and the 20 of social? How are we proactive in making connections, and how are we modernizing? This was 7 years ago, before the reskilling agenda, the way that we are thinking about building business critical skills that are for our future. So I guess what I'm saying here is the effective practice that we need to take forward into the next year itself is not unprecedented. It is the stuff that worked in the past, and it's the stuff that works now, but it is uncommon. And that for me is the critical thing. Is I have been thinking about, if we want to work smarter, we want to deliver better business value as we move forward. We want to move out of this constant change into really being proactive in our profession. I believe that we need to get back to basics. What do I mean by that? As learning professionals, we understand that there are many things that are going on in order for us to make a difference. Our culture, our technology infrastructure. But I want to go even further back to first principles from that. And I want to go back to what influences our behavior. And many of us who looked at psychology, at cognitive psychology and cognitive science, we understand this cycle, that our behaviors influence our thoughts influence our feelings. Those combined go on to influence our behavior. This is fundamental This is fundamental. I don't have to spend a lot of time on this because as learning and development professionals, we're no strangers to the brain. We are very much into cognitive science now, understanding what makes good learning design, good learning experiences. We understand more about heuristics and biases, particularly through the work that we're doing through diversity and inclusion. We understand about attitudes and beliefs that stop people from doing things differently. We understand about the intentional mental models that we use in order to make smarter, better decisions. We understand about mindsets, fixed mindsets, growth mindsets, and the difference that that makes. And we also understand a little about metacognition. How do we help individuals learn how to learn? How do we reflect and how do we think on that? But what's been occurring to me is how often do we actually think about the thinking habits that influence our own professional lives and our own professional decisions? And that's really led to this work that we want to share with you today, and also share with you in the book that's been literally just released. It's kind of bubbled out of the Emerging Stronger podcast series that I've been doing with Shannon and Michelle, as we analysed the interviews and the recommendations that were there. Absolutely phenomenal. But what struck us was that it wasn't just about the behaviours that we were encouraged to do, but also the fact that the people who were being more resilient, who were being able to ride this wave and really take advantage of the change, seem to be approaching things differently. They've got a mindset, a thinking habit, which led me to say, actually, what are those thinking habits, those persistent perspectives and those kind of settled ways of thinking that influence the work that we do in our professional world of work? And that's going to be, we've definitely been covering that in the book, and I want to share with that with you today, because there's a couple of things that we know about habits. We know that repetition reinforces habits. So, for example, in our professional world of work, we do what we do. We create online learning, we create programs, we create initiatives, we do what we're asked for. We're regularly asked for more courses. So we get into the habit of being able to respond, particularly in the last year. We celebrate the things that work well for us. The repetition, we tend to repeat those things that have worked well for us, those things that are easy. So we can see how very much we can get into the habit of just falling into the way we think about doing things. But it might not necessarily be the right way of thinking to get us through this new change. And that's what I want to explore with you, because our thinking habits, some of them have a knock-on effect everywhere, like a keystone habit. If I start to drink more water, it's a great keystone health habit, because it will have an impact on my cognition, on my sleep, on my exercise, on my ability. It has a knock-on effect as we go through. And I think that potentially those persistent perspectives that we carry around as professional learning people, that have been shaped by our past, the excellence in our past, the history of our past, also potentially lay the foundation for our future and shape our professional decisions, whether we want to or not. So they influence the decisions that relate to technology. They might influence our response to opportunity and challenge. They influence our go-to behaviors, particularly when we're under pressure. They influence what we celebrate, and potentially they influence what we reject. And that's a really tough one for us as well. So I'm going to be a little bit controversial here, and just want to share with you some thoughts here, because I want to share with you 5 thinking habits that I have observed through my work, working in maturity, working in understanding what learning and development practices deliver better business results, and also through the last year, combining those together. And I'm very, very interested to kind of see your perspective and your take. Now, as Harold Yaki says, everything that we do in our profession really is in perpetual beta. This is the first time I've shared this. It is deliberate in the sense that it's a model. There are dimensions coming through to this, but equally you know, what Aaron Pradhan, through his work in model thinkers, has flagged up that, you know, the models that we use are just maps. They're not the territory. There may be some missing, but it's about having a language that will allow us to reflect inwards and understand what's going on here. So again, it's great to you know, sort of get your feedback here, and you know, it's great to see some of this resonating. Now, if you've got questions, please raise them in the session as well, and I'm very happy to have a look at it. So let's have a look about those thinking habits. I'll tell you something, thinking about thinking is hard work. Particularly when we're so busy, and it's really stretched me to think about how, as professionals, we define our identity, particularly when we don't talk about that. So I've looked at this, particularly from the interview responses and the research work, in 5 different areas. You know, how do we think of ourselves and the values that we add back to business? Now, that's one area. You know, if I think about my role and the value I bring as a learning professional, what's my perception of myself? What is my essential role? Yes, we are instructional designers. Yes, we create content. Yes, we do technical and platforms and facilitate and mentoring and coaching and performance consulting. Yes, we do all of that. But your essential role as a learning professional, it's very, you know, that kind of helps us understand our thinking, our identity. How do we define our relationship with others? How do we think about our timescales and the way that we work and connect together with other people? You know, again, our history reinforces our habits on timescales. And how do we define our thinking around risk and innovation and things that are changing around us? So this is at a fundamental level. You know, our perception of ourselves, our perception of our identity really does influence how we work forward. And this is how I want to share through with you. So if I go digging deeper, and you know, how do you think about your value? And this one I'd like us to discuss. I think traditionally we've certainly seen that actually we define our value in terms of the learning problems that we solve for organizations. This is a good thing, ladies and gentlemen. You know, we have actually really made a difference. We've already talked about that. You know, we're solving the kind of learning problems that people bring to us. But a thinking strategy that we notice with the emerging stronger interviews, and also with all of the high performing organizations who are consistently delivering business value, is that they seem to have shifted, a pattern seems to have shifted, and rather than saying I solve learning problems, a learning first perception of my value is actually, my value is all about business first, and how do I solve business problems, sometimes with learning. Subtle shift there, but it's really, I think, made a difference in the way that people have emerged out of this. It's allowed them to spot new opportunities, spot new ways of creating service and value in the organization, spot creative ways of using their platforms to facilitate the whole transfer into remote working. So, you know, I'd be really interested to get your views in the chat room, you know, about how these core thinking habits, if I'm a person who actually believes, and my value is about solving learning problems, you know, how does that influence the decisions that we take? So it would be, I'm going to just pause for a moment and let us just think about that and reflect on that. You know, if our perception of our value is that we solve learning problems, what kind of influence would that have on our decisions that we take? So again, just like to hand over into the podcast into you. So okay, so Travis, thanks for your comments that we've had a little bit earlier about everyone wants to buy and spin up their own thing. That is so important, and I think when we're solving learning problems, I think we can be a little bit overwhelmed with all of those things. You know, how do I do the current thing that I do, but faster, quicker, and with different technologies? That might stop us, for example, in actually looking what's needed in the business. So be interested in your thoughts, Travis, on that. Yes, Rebecca, you talk as well about training experiences sort of that the organizations always wanted their training yesterday. So that learning first, it's that habit. We have to deliver their training because they want it yesterday and they want it now, and that kind of reinforces that habit. But the question then becomes, actually, will that genuinely help us drive better business value? Will that help us emerge stronger? We've been working with Go One, who have allowed us to, created the workbook for us. So, take all this independent thinking. They've also been working with Laurie Niles Hoffman and Amanda Nolan with a great triage document as well that says, okay, well, Rebecca, when we get those problems, how can we actually ask different questions of the people who are asking us, so in order to understand whether it's a business problem rather than a learning problem. So really important point that you have there about the questions that we ask, and that goes back to your points at the beginning there as well. Anita, thank you. You sharing about our thinking is one of our highest abilities. But Anita, do we turn it on ourselves? Do we actually look at our own thinking habits and say, could this be influencing my response to stress, my response to the future, my response to the decisions that I'm making as well? It's one of our highest abilities, and often I think because of the challenges that we have, it's quite tough. Dinya, you're talking about limiting our options and impact on business. I think it can. Be interesting to know your views about how that might happen. And Rebecca, you're talking here about us identifying behaviours that are desired. And Rebecca, you've also touched on the fact that this isn't everyone has to move to the right, but it's about the ones on the right for us are those thinking habits that potentially will help us to emerge stronger from the disruption that we're having. We're still having to look at learning solutions, but when we drive through with business problems, then I think that this is really going to be a change for us. Let's just have a look at a couple more of these comments here. Lisa, you're talking about when you create learning based on what you're given. Solving business problems, you mean you influence the process. You make recommendations on how the business can respond. Really important point there, because sometimes, Lisa, when you're in a business first thinking habit, sometimes you're willing to say no. And I know Shannon has kind of really educated me on this, working with organizations, really getting in under the skin of what we need to say no to. So please keep the conversation going, because I think you're kind of getting the sense of, when we're in the habit of thinking I solve learning problems, whilst it's good, it can cause us a little level of disruption. So I'd like to share with you maybe a few more of the thinking habits, and then for us to then say, okay, well, what does this mean? The other one that I was talking about before was about our role. How do we think about our role? Do we think about ourselves as rightly knowledgeable experts? We know learning, we know about evidence-based practice, particularly if you're linked in with the Guild and the amazing work that Jane Bozas and the Guild are doing on creating a great evidence-based practice. Now it's about us bringing our best selves into work in order to identify the best way forward for learning and development. Absolutely, that's a very important aspect. But our emergent experts in the podcast, and again, the top performing teams in our maturity research over the 15 years, said it's not just that, it's also that and our ability to prioritize how we listen to what's going on in the world of work. And that kind of comes back to your question about analytics and questions. What data is out there that helps us understand what's going on in the world of work? Harold Yaki was in a podcast recently, and he was quoting John C. Brown about the fact, as learning professionals, as people professionals, as knowledge people, as OD people, we need to marinate in that world of work to truly know what's going on. Charles Jennings is the same, and he and the guys at Tulsa 70-20-10 Institute, sort of like a cent spent on delivery and design. is only worth a cent when you actually use a whole dollar worth of time spent on analysing and marinating in the problem, listening to what's going on, spotting the critical tasks that need to be dealt with, working out how to deal with it. So that kind of empathetic explorer really brings out the very best in our knowledge. But often we come in with a mindset of that we know best, and we don't necessarily think we've got the time to listen because we're so busy responding. So again, this is a thinking habit. Again, love to know your thoughts coming through on that. How do you think about your relationship with other people as a learning professional? Your thinking habits about your way you relate to other people will influence the decisions that you want to make. Are you independent, that you rely on your learning and development expertise and that's what you bring to the table? Or have you got a mental habit of thinking about being interdependent? I know for me personally, as an explorer, as someone who is hungry to find out how do we drive business value, I am absolutely fascinated by this. Research was a way for me to bring the outside in. How do we collaborate, connect and communicate together in order to really drive change through? And also as a manager for a team, how do I bring in new people with skills that I don't have, maybe even from other disciplines? How do we work together with new teams in our organization against those common goals? How do we put some of our knowledge down in order to deliver against a higher goal? So again, what is our typical go-to thinking habit? If we think about a decision that we've made quite recently, was it based out of, this is what I know about learning and development, this is what I'm bringing to the table? Or was it based out of, maybe we need to work differently with other people? So again, it can influence our decisions and influence our thinking. Denise, you're talking earlier about the business case is not always considered in L&D, and I think that is one of the downsides of relying solely on our expertise. And actually looking broader and wider outside into the way that we work with our partners can be really, really, really significant there. So I just want to share with you a couple of others because it's in the book. You can, this is just an introduction, a flavour for you to be able to look at this a little bit more deeply. But I think one of the other things that kind of influences our habits that we've got into, that influences our thinking, is our perception and habits and thoughts about time and timescales. Because typically we've generally acted for the future. We've been driven by longer term capability goals, thinking about our leadership programs and our initiatives and our culture change. And also, to be quite honest, the length of time it can take for us to create and source something in order to meet those goals. That habit can mean that typically we're under we've got into that habit of actually what we do, it needs to be long, it needs to be quality. I do not deny anything about quality, but what we found for emerging stronger, we actually need to work out how we can meet those long-term goals and the immediate objectives. And if we want to emerge stronger and deliver better business value, how can we think about embracing speed, embracing agility, and not necessarily forfeiting quality? It is fundamentally a different way of thinking, and which is why it's so easy for us to talk about things like agile design and all of that kind of thing, and always go back to what we've used in the past. We need to really question our thinking habits in order to move forward. And the last one I wanted to talk about is the habits related to our decisions around risk and innovation. I think what I've seen in the past is that a lot of us base our decisions on risk and innovation on what has worked well for us in the past. And there's absolutely an important point to say that our experiences in the past actually help us to drive into the future. But if we constantly are looking to bring the past into the future, it also causes us a problem when the whole world is changing around us. And what we've found, and certainly in some of the research work that we've done that I had led up until 2019 is that actually those high performing learning organizations were led by teams which were willing to also let go and move on, and being shaped by saying, you know, that's worked for us in the past, thank you. It was a Marie Kondo, thank you, but goodbye, because I'm now moving on. I'm going to try experiments. I'm going to be trying moving. But it's the way we think about these things which are absolutely so critical. Just want to give you a quick example, and then to show where this might go. One of the things that we found in the Towards Maturity research 15 years is that whatever tools and technologies we use, none of them correlated back to business value. The tools in themselves don't do that. It's what we do with them that correlates back to business value. So I just took a tool that most people have got, some kind of access to content libraries, whether it's, you know, sort of Go One or your own content libraries. Most of us have got that. Now, if we look at the decisions that we make around our content libraries, this is a micro example. I'm just trying to kind of show you what I mean here. You know, that if the decisions are, you know, I'm going to add value through this content library, but I'm thinking about that because of my learning solutions, and actually my role is to bring my expertise to help you get the best value out of my content library, then potentially that can result in some thinking and some decisions around, you know what, I can save money. I can reduce friction. You know, I can deliver more content for you for less. I can help you sign in faster, quicker, better. I can provide you with more choice. You know, we're solving some learning problems. But also in terms of what I can do as an expert is I can evaluate vendors for you. I can curate. I can develop playlists. These are all good things. I'm absolutely not denying that. But have we potentially missed a chance to really think about that tool in our hand? And if we looked at it from a different thinking habit, I solve business problems first. I'm constantly looking for ways to bring the outside in. This is not all about me. It's about how I connect with and help others connect. If we then think about that same library, we might also be thinking about, you know what, I'm working on improving a specific business critical task right now. How might this content help? Very focused, because we're looking at solving the business problem and then looking at the content rather than looking at how the content might hopefully be helpful. It also it gives us a chance to say sometimes it's not the right place to use this, and it's okay to say no. When it comes down to interdependence, we can then be saying, okay, well, who else is using this? What kind of creative playlists are they creating? How can I share those with other people? If someone else is using what I've done to solve their problems, let me find out how. Let me learn. Let me share that learning. These are just two small examples of how our very extremes of thinking habits might influence what we do with the simple tools in our hands and the decisions that we need to make. So in terms of working smarter to drive better business value, you know, these thinking habits, which I think are the ones that have traditionally been reinforced through repetition, are the ones that quite a few of us are comfortable in. We operate well in this. But you know, just before we end, it would be great to have a poll. You know, do we think that any one of these might be holding us back? And if so, which one do we think would be holding us back the most? So Karen, I'm just going to hand over to you there. Let's have a look at the poll. It would be great for you to just have a think about that. For those of you who are reflectors, I hope you'll rewatch the recording, because I'm very conscious that we are tackling something which actually demands reflection. So putting this poll up here is maybe a little bit unfair, but at the same time it helps us to kind of maybe embed a few of those things in. So it'd be great to get your thoughts and your views on that at the moment. Anita, I'm just going to read your proverb. Iron sharpens iron. Oh my goodness, absolutely. Interdependence is so right. You know, since completing my work with the Towards Maturity research project, I've spent the last 2 years exactly in that environment, and it's exciting. but it's also tiring as well. But it's where there's life in the overlap. That overlap of our expertise with other people's expertise actually can create new opportunities there. And Anita, your proverb there, and thank you so much for sharing that. That's really, really relevant to us. Maybe, Karen, we might be able to share these ones now. Let's have a look at the results amongst us.
Yeah, so I
I think
broadcast.
it's
Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah,
I don't mean to talk over you, but I've broadcast the results
I know,
and they're pretty well spread out.
brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. Because Karen, this is personal. This is personal, and there is an important point here about having a deep reflection. And one of the things that we've done in the ebook is to have this on a scale for us to say, okay, when no one's looking, genuinely, how did I make my decisions? Do I recognize this in some of the decisions that I've made? And has it been helpful? Elizabeth, you kind of seen your role as a skills development consultant. Powerful role, powerful role. But again, our thinking habits might influence how we conduct that role there. So this is really interesting. You're saying the independence, us acting on our own, that ivory tower, seems to be the one that resonates. But our holding on to what's worked for us in the past also is important. Now, letting go of things doesn't mean to say that we ignore everything we've ever learnt. Absolutely not. 15 years of research, there were patterns of effective behaviors that really, really made a difference to us. So, very powerful insights for us there. And hopefully, Karen, we might be able to share those a little bit later as well. So kind of coming towards the end, and I guess all the time I've been talking here is, just wanted to bring it back up, is what habits do we believe we need to develop? Now, those on the right are the ones that have come out of our work with high performing learning teams and also from the emergent experts that we've been working with. So that they're the ones where people are saying, actually, when we think like this, we're better equipped to tackle the pandemic, and we're one step ahead, and we can actually take advantage of the opportunities because they're starting to think differently. Those ones on the left hand side are quite make it slightly harder for us to deal with ambiguity. But I was speaking to an amazing guy over here in Europe who said, a lot of this is yes and, but we put them on 2 dimensions here because it's important for us to kind of explore at either end, rather than, because that's the way that they will actually challenge us the most. So, the last section I wanted to talk about is about making the shift. Anne Bartlett-Bragg was one of the people who was on our podcast series. She said, challenge our assumptions, think differently, stand on your head. We've got to look at this from a different perspective, which means we need to understand the perspective that we're currently taking, which is what this has been about. Now, one of the things that we wanted to talk about was this cycle again. We've been talking primarily about our thinking behavior, but we know our thinking habits are so difficult to change, and yet they influence how we feel and our behaviors. But what we can change is our practical approaches that help us to adopt and accelerate new behaviors that help to make that shift. And they're the things that we've actually put into the ebook for you to be able to share. But also they're the things that you know about. I've put all of these graphics up here because actually if you think about all of the different perspectives that you've been learning about in your career, your experiences, the things that have gone wrong for you, the evidence-based practice that you already understand, you'll know that when you start to look at that with a different thinking habit, it will release new experiments for you. It will release new ideas for you, and to kind of influence change, but influence change from within. Because then we can stop fighting everyone to get on board with us. But actually, how do we get on board with new thinking habits that will actually encourage us to develop perhaps new little small changes in our own world of work? And I've left it with some minutes at the end here for us ask you to maybe reflect in the chat room any small changes that you would want to make, or you think that you could make, in order to help build new thinking habits or strengthen thinking habits through repetition in your own mind. Now, I'm really happy for people to kind of connect with me directly through on LinkedIn, but I think now is the time, at the beginning of the year, as a result of the disruption, is the time for us to be bold. And my friend Sarah Lindsay at PricewaterhouseCoopers, in our podcast interviews, talked about do something different that will just trigger a change in us, let alone a change for the business value, and the business value will drive forward. Now, I haven't had time to share with you 15 years of research, all of those practical things. Contact me on LinkedIn, contact me on Twitter. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you've got about specific areas. But I want to say thank you for allowing me to share my thinking with you, because fundamentally, we know in theory the things that will help us drive better business value, and sometimes the change needs to happen from within, and I'm hoping this last hour has helped you to work out what that means for you. So Karen, I don't know if there are any questions that I haven't answered. I've tried to connect with you as much as possible through the chat room, but Karen, if there are any questions,
There was
let me know.
there was just a lot of discussion back and forth, which was great. The one question that I did see was from Dennis. He said the business case is not always considered in L&D. We can hire Hollywood actors and create a great video, but does this benefit justify the cost? What are your thoughts on that?
No.
There you go.
Because Dennis, is all about what's needed in business. Get to grips with that. Get to grips working collectively with the business on the problem. And then if we need the Hollywood actors, if it really is shown that the Hollywood actors can help, then they're going to be willing to pay. So, start with getting to know the business. Start with exploring that. And that's why I really strongly recommend you take a look at the infographic that Go On have also kind of got Laurie and Amanda from Niles Nolan to work on. That really helps us to work through some of those challenges. So I hope I wasn't too glib.
No, I don't think so, because I think that definitely is a very valid answer, because that's very, very true. So that really brings us to the end of our presentation. It was a great presentation, Laura. Thank you so, so much. We have a lot to consider. Thank the sponsor of this presentation, Go One, who brought you Laura to give us this wonderful information. And we also would like to thank Adobe Connect, who gave us the platform for this particular webinar. And you can learn more about Adobe Connect by clicking that link there. I will be posting this recording and a PDF of the slides that you did see in our sponsored webinar library. And you will also receive an email from us indicating when that's available to you, so you can view it at and really go through things again. So thank you so much, and thank you, Laura. And everyone, please have a good rest of your day.